Move, old lady, that seat is mine. He did not ask. He did not wait. He grabbed her arm right there in front of everyone and yanked her forward so hard her glasses flew off her face and skidded across the terminal floor. Her handbag hit the ground. Her hands shook. And he stood over her jaw-tight voice like a blade, and he said it loud enough for the entire gate to hear. Not one person stood up. Not one voice rose. 51 passengers watched a 76-year-old woman get manhandled over a chair and said absolutely nothing. That silence lasted exactly 90 seconds. Then it cost one man everything. If you are new here, welcome. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on your notifications so you never miss a story like this one. And drop a comment below telling me what city you are watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now let us get into what happened at Gate 22 of O'Hare International Airport on a Tuesday morning that looked at first like any other Tuesday morning. Because what happened next is something none of those 51 passengers will ever forget for the rest of their lives. Here is what nobody in that gate area knew yet. They did not know that in the next 90 minutes, the man who grabbed that woman's arm would lose his flight, lose his meeting, lose the $40 million deal he had been building toward for 18 months, and watch his name attach itself to a hashtag that would be trending nationally before his rebooked plane left the ground. They did not know that the quiet woman sitting in that corner seat had spent 19 years as a federal judge. They did not know she served on a government oversight board with the authority to investigate major airlines. They did not know she was a personal friend of the most important man in the room the grabber was racing to impress. They did not know any of that. They just saw an old woman with a pale blue coat and a handbag in her lap, and a left hand that trembled slightly sitting in a chair she had earned by arriving 2 hours early and waiting without complaint. And they saw a man decide she was in his way. He was wrong about that. He was wrong about almost everything. But he would not find out how wrong until the overhead speaker crackled. The gate area erupted and a flight to New York was canceled because of a chair. Now let us go back to the beginning. Let us go back to Gate 22. O'Hare International 7:43 in the morning when the delay board had just updated for the second time, and a man named Craig Whitfield walked through the gate entrance already on the phone. The flight to New York had been delayed twice, first by 35 minutes, then by another hour and 10. The announcement came through the overhead speakers in that particular airline voice, smooth and professional and completely devoid of useful information. We apologize for the inconvenience and appreciate your patience. Which was the airline's polished way of saying we know you are frustrated and we are choosing not to engage with that directly. Gate 22 at O'Hare was the kind of place that a long delay turns into something between a refugee camp and a waiting room. Every seat was taken. People sat on the floor with their backs against the walls, carry-on bags stacked between their knees, eyes either fixed to phones or aimed blankly at the departures board with that specific mixture of hope and resignation that only airports produce. Couples had run out of things to say to each other and were sitting in the comfortable silence of two people who have accepted that neither of them is in charge of this situation. A young mother near the windows had been managing a restless toddler for going on 2 hours. A college kid near the far end had stretched his legs across 2 seats and fallen asleep with his headphones on, immune to the whole thing. The overhead speakers crackled every few minutes. They said nothing useful. The departures board did not change. And then Craig Whitfield walked in. He was 44 years old, broad-shouldered, the kind of tan that comes from having both money and time. His jacket fit perfectly, the way clothes fit when someone else has made all the decisions about them. His carry-on was the kind that costs more than most people spend on groceries in a month, dark, leather monogrammed, rolled behind him with the practiced ease of a man who has been in and out of airports since before some of the people in this gate area were born. He had his phone pressed to his ear before he cleared the entrance, and his voice carried in the way that voices do when a person has spent so many years talking over other people in conference rooms that they have simply forgotten what a normal indoor volume sounds like. No, he was saying, no, listen to me. Morrison does not know what he is talking about. Pull the contracts and call me back in 20 minutes. He ended the call without a goodbye. He never said goodbye. He had decided somewhere around his 40th birthday that goodbyes were a waste of time, and he had not revisited that position once in 4 years. He stood at the entrance to Gate 22 and did what he always did when he walked into a new space. He scanned it. Not to appreciate it, not to find someone to talk to. He scanned it the way you scan a resource, assessing what it contained and what it could give him. His gaze moved from face to face with the practiced efficiency of a man who has spent 2 decades reducing every room to its useful and non-useful components. The crying toddler near the windows, not useful. The sleeping college kid across 2 seats, irritant. The businessman in the gray blazer who looked almost important enough to acknowledge, possibly useful later. The couple sharing a phone charger. Irrelevant. And then his eyes landed on the chair. It was at the end of the second row, right beside the floor-to-ceiling window that looked out onto the tarmac. Corner position. Natural light coming in from the left. Enough distance from the toddler that you could still hear yourself think. Open space on both sides. The best seat in the entire gate area, and Craig recognized it immediately with the certainty of a man who has always identified the best available option in any room and then moved to claim it. The problem was that someone was already in it. She was old. That was the first thing Craig noticed, and in his particular way of processing a room, it was almost the only thing that registered. Old and small and wearing a pale blue coat over a light blouse. White hair, a handbag in her lap, the old-fashioned kind, structured and stiff, the kind women carried in a different era. She was holding the handbag with both hands, not tightly, just resting. The way you rest your hands on something familiar. Her eyes were aimed at the departures board with the same quiet patience the rest of the gate area had adopted. Craig did not see the steadiness in her posture. He did not see the quality of her stillness, the particular kind that is not passivity, but its opposite, the stillness of someone who has been in rooms far more pressured than Gate 22 and has learned to carry herself through them without letting them move her. He did not see any of that. He saw an obstacle. He walked toward it. He stood directly in front of her, blocking her view of the departures board. She did not look up at first. He let the silence sit for exactly 3 seconds, then he said, "Hey, the way you say it to an animal you are trying to shoo out of a doorway." Not cruel, precisely, just entirely indifferent to the fact that there was a full human being attached to the word. She looked up. Her eyes were dark brown and entirely clear. The skin around them was soft and creased the kind of lines that come from a lifetime of expression, from decades of paying attention to people in rooms and choosing exactly the right response. She had a slight tremor in her left hand, barely perceptible unless you were looking. Craig was not looking. "This seat," he said, gesturing at the chair beneath her as if she might have missed it. "I need it." There was a pause, a single breath of one. "I have been sitting here for 2 hours," she said. Her voice was soft but clear. The voice of a woman who had spent a career using exactly the right amount of volume for exactly the right situation. There was no apology in it, no negotiation, just the fact stated plainly. Craig shifted his carry-on from one hand to the other. "I can see that. I still need the seat." She glanced at the empty seat directly beside her. She nodded toward it gently, the way you point something out to someone who has overlooked the obvious answer. "There is an empty seat right there," she said. Craig's jaw tightened. "I know there is an empty seat right there. I want this one." She looked at him with those clear, steady eyes. She did not look afraid. She did not look angry. She looked something closer to patient, the particular patience that is not the same as passive, the kind that has been earned through 4 decades of choosing not to let difficult people win. "I am not moving," she said, 4 words quiet as a held breath. But they landed like a door being shut. Her name was Dorothy Mae Henson. She was 76 years old. She had arrived at Gate 22 2 hours and 18 minutes before this moment, not because she was the sort of person who overcorrected for anxiety, but because she had made a promise to her granddaughter. Dorothy Henson did not make promises she did not intend to keep. She was traveling to New York because Amara, her youngest, her sharp one, her 3 a.m. phone call girl, was graduating from Columbia Law School in 2 days. Dorothy had been to Columbia once before for Amara's first-year orientation 6 years ago. She had sat in the back of the auditorium and watched her granddaughter walk through the doors with the other incoming students, and she had thought quietly and entirely to herself, this is what all of it was for. Every piece of it. This. She had been a federal judge for 19 years. She had been appointed to the bench at 43, which at the time made her one of the youngest federal judges in her circuit, and one of a very small number of black women to hold that position. She had ruled on cases that made newspapers and cases that made history, and cases that nobody outside the courtroom would ever know about. But that had changed the shape of someone's life permanently. She had retired 3 years ago at 73, not because anyone made her, but because she had decided she wanted more time in her garden in Memphis and less time explaining to grown men that their confidence was not in fact a legal argument. After retirement, she had accepted an appointment to the Citizens Aviation Standards Board, a federal oversight body with the authority to audit airlines, investigate passenger rights violations, and recommend regulatory action to the Department of Transportation. She did not advertise this. She carried a card, plain white, government seal, the kind of card that means something specific to people who know what it is. She had buried her husband Raymond 8 years ago. She had survived breast cancer at 68, driven herself to every single chemotherapy appointment because she did not want to make a fuss and also because, frankly, she did not trust anyone else to find the parking. She had 3 children. 2 of them had offered to fly with her today. She had told them both no. She was 76, not 96, and she was entirely capable of getting herself to New York. Her youngest son had said, "Mom, please, just let someone come with you." She had said, "Marcus, I love you. I will call you when I land." What Craig Whitfield did not see when he stood in front of her and decided she was movable, the particular quality of Dorothy's stillness. The way she held her handbag with both hands, not clutching it in anxiety, but resting it. The way you rest something familiar, something you have carried so long it has become part of the weight you move through the world with. He did not see that she had been watching the departures board with the focused patience of a woman who knows that some things take exactly as long as they take, and that getting agitated about the timeline changes nothing. He did not see her left hand resting on the handbag, its small and constant tremor, the kind that has been there for 2 years. Benign, the doctors said, just the body making its adjustments, and which Dorothy thought about in approximately the same way she thought about the weather. Present, unremarkable, not worth organizing your life around. He did not see any of that. He had looked at her and seen old, small, female, alone. He had processed all of that as one category, and the category was movable. He had never been more wrong about anything. Dorothy had been meeting men like Craig Whitfield her entire professional life. They came in different suits and different decades, but they all had the same thing behind their eyes, that particular brand of certainty that has never once been genuinely tested, that has confused, never being told no with actually deserving yes. She had ruled from the bench against men like this. She had sat across conference tables from men like this. She had listened to their arguments and found them wanting, and said so in language that was precise and final, and left no room for the kind of negotiation they were used to winning through persistence. She had never moved for one of them. She was not going to start today. And underneath all of that, underneath the history and the career and the particular iron of her composure, there was one simple, uncomplicated fact. She was 76 years old. She had been sitting in this chair for over 2 hours, and in 2 days, her granddaughter was going to walk across a stage at Columbia University with a Juris Doctor degree that she had earned by waiting tables all through undergrad and studying until midnight, and calling her grandmother at 3 a.m. from a parking lot, crying so hard the words would not come out. Dorothy was going to be in that auditorium, not on a video call, not watching a recording afterward. There in person, in a seat in the 3rd row with Janet and Marcus Jr. on either side of her and Amara's name printed in the program in her lap. Nothing. Not a delayed flight, not a man with a leather carry-on and a voice that was too loud. Not anything was going to change that. Craig Whitfield was not used to being told no, not by his staff, not by his vendors, not by the contractors who had built his 3 investment properties, not by the restaurants where he always managed to get the table by the window, even when the hostess said there were no tables available. He had built his entire adult life on the premise that persistence, his particular brand of loud, relentless, entitled persistence, could move any obstacle. He had tested this theory many times. It had not failed him yet. He leaned down slightly, bringing his face closer to hers. It was a physical choice, deliberate, the move of a man who uses space as a tool. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped into something lower and more controlled, which was somehow more menacing than when it had been loud. "Look," he said, "I do not think you understand how this works. I have had a very long morning. My flight has been delayed twice. I have a meeting in New York that I cannot be late to. I need a specific kind of environment to make my calls. You are sitting in that environment. You have a perfectly good alternative 1 seat to your left. So, what I am asking you to do is a very simple thing. You can either move voluntarily, or I can go to the desk and speak to someone there and have them ask you to move. Those are your choices." Dorothy did not pull back, did not flinch. She looked at him with those clear brown eyes and said very calmly, "Then go speak to someone at the desk." The gate area had shifted. Not dramatically, not with noise. But the people in the closest 2 rows had quietly stopped what they were doing. A woman named Rosa Delgado, 61, sitting 3 seats down with a novel open in her lap, had set the book down. Not closed, it just put it face down in her lap and turned her attention fully to what was happening 4 feet away. She had the focused, measuring look of a woman who has recognized a pattern she has encountered before and is deciding how involved she wants to become. Tyler Reeves, 31, a travel vlogger in a gray hoodie 2 rows back, had shifted in his seat so that his body was angled toward the confrontation. His phone was in his hand. He had not pressed record yet, but his thumb was close. Priya Okafor, 26, across the aisle with a laptop open on her knees, was watching over the top of the screen, with an expression that was not quite surprise and not quite alarm. The kind of expression that says, "I was afraid this was going to go this direction." Craig set his carry-on down with a sharp click and walked to the gate desk. Kevin Marsh, 28, had been working gate 22 since 5 in the morning. He was on his 3rd coffee. His collar was neat, and his expression was the practiced neutrality of someone who has been trained to manage this exact category of passenger and who has in 3 years of gate work become very good at recognizing the specific flavor of complaint they are bringing him. He looked up as Craig approached. "I need to report a problem," Craig said. "Of course, sir. What can I help you with?" "There is an elderly woman at the end of row 2. She is sitting in a seat I need. I have asked her politely to move, and she has refused." Kevin looked in the direction Craig was pointing. Something shifted behind his eyes, a micro-adjustment barely visible. When he spoke, his voice was even and careful. "Sir, the seating in the gate area is open seating. We are not able to ask a passenger to vacate a seat they are currently occupying unless there is a safety or security concern." "I understand it is open seating," Craig said. "I am not asking you to assign me a seat. I am asking you to ask that woman to move because she is being unreasonable and I need that specific location to conduct my business. Sir, I understand your frustration. Unfortunately, I am not able to direct another passenger to move from a seat in the general waiting area. There is no policy that allows for that." Craig stared at him. The vein at his temple had become slightly more visible. "Do you know how long I have been flying with this airline? Do you understand that I have a board meeting in 4 hours? I am asking you to do something very simple, and you are telling me that you cannot do something very simple." Kevin's jaw moved, the inside of his cheek briefly engaged. "Sir, what I am telling you is that I do not have the authority to ask a passenger to vacate their seat in the open gate area. If there is something else I can help you with today, I am happy to do that." Craig looked at him for 3 full seconds. Then he pulled out his phone. "Fine," he said. "I will call the head office myself." He walked away from the desk and dialed. not the general customer service line. A direct number he had stored from a previous escalation, a regional manager he had argued all the way to resolution over a baggage claim 18 months ago. He had won that one. He intended to win this one. He paced near the windows, one hand cutting through the air as he spoke. His voice was too loud. "I do not care what the gate protocol is. I want to speak to whoever is responsible for this terminal. There is a passenger who is refusing a reasonable request and blocking access to a seat I need for business purposes. She is being disruptive." He stopped, listened. His face tightened. "What do you mean you cannot escalate this right now?" Another pause. "Do you know who I am?" Whatever the answer was, it did not give him what he wanted. His face had gone the dark color of a man who has pulled a lever that is supposed to move something and found it stuck. He ended the call without finishing the sentence he had started. Back in the gate area, Rosa Delgado leaned toward the man sitting beside her, a quiet fellow in his 50s who had been reading a paperback since before Craig arrived. She said quietly, "She has not moved an inch." The man looked over at Dorothy. He shook his head once. "Good for her," he said. Rosa nodded. She did not know who Dorothy was. She did not know her name or her history or her title. But she knew what she was watching. She had been watching it her entire life in different rooms with different men. Craig stood still for exactly 3 seconds after the call ended, the particular stillness of a man calculating whether to back down or push further. Then he walked back across the gate area toward Dorothy. He did not lean down this time. He stood straight, hands at his sides. His voice was low and tight. "Last chance," he said. "Move now." Dorothy looked up at him, and then she did something nobody in the gate area expected. She smiled. Not wide, not mocking. Small and steady and entirely undefeated. The smile of a woman who has seen worse than Craig Whitfield and is still here. "No," she said. The woman 3 seats down, Rosa actually made a sound, a small, involuntary exhale. Craig's face went a hard, flat color. His hand gripped the strap of his carry-on until his knuckles changed shade. For a moment, just a fraction of one something crossed his expression that was neither anger nor calculation. Something less controlled. Something that had not been let out in a long time. "You think this is funny?" he said. "I think Dorothy said carefully and clearly that you are making a very large scene over a very small thing. And I think that if you had been raised differently, you would be embarrassed right now." The gate area went completely still. The words sat in the air of Gate 22. The way certain things do not. Loud, not dramatic, just present and expanding. The way a small stone dropped in still water produces rings far larger than itself. Craig's mouth opened, then closed. He was a man who had built a career on having the next word ready, always the next argument, the next lever, the next pressure point. For a full 4 seconds, he had nothing. Then something shifted in him. The controlled version of Craig Whitfield, the one who wore his arrogance with a thin professional veneer, loosened. And what came out underneath was uglier. He raised his voice. Not a shout. Worse than a shout, the particular carrying tone of a man who wants an audience and has decided to take one. He said loud enough for the 2 closest rows to hear clearly, "You people always think the rules do not apply." He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. The words landed in Gate 22 like something that had been waiting to fall. Rosa Delgado set her novel completely aside and sat forward. The man who had gone back to his paperback lowered it again without being conscious of doing it. Priya Okafor's hands went still on her laptop keyboard. Tyler Reeves pressed record. Dorothy's expression did not change. Her voice, when she spoke, was the same quiet and measured thing it had been since Craig first walked over. She said, "Finish that sentence. Go on." He did not finish it. The words died in his throat as the gate area settled into a new kind of attention around him, harder than before, more directed. Craig looked at the faces turned toward him and read them the way he always read rooms. What he read was not the weary neutrality of before. Something had shifted. These people were not just watching anymore. He chose a different approach. He lifted his carry-on and set it on the empty seat directly beside Dorothy, deliberately without asking. He put it down firmly, taking up the space, crowding her corner without technically touching her. It was a small act of territorial aggression designed to make her feel enclosed to communicate through space what he could no longer communicate through argument. Dorothy looked at the bag. She looked at Craig. Then she reached over with one unhurried hand and moved the bag off the seat and set it on the floor beside his feet. She did it the way you move something that does not belong where it is, simply and without comment. That seat is not yours either, she said. From across the aisle, the man in the navy suit produced a single involuntary sound, short and quiet, the kind that comes out of you before you decide to let it. Craig turned toward him. The man met his eyes, did not look away. Craig turned back. He made a bid for the room. He addressed the gate area rather than Dorothy, his tone shifting into something that tried to be reasonable, the voice of a man appealing to collective common sense. She has been in this seat long enough. There are other people who could use it. I am not trying to make a scene. I am asking for basic common courtesy. Nobody responded the way he hoped. Rosa crossed her arms. The man with the paperback looked at Craig over his reading glasses and then deliberately and unhurriedly looked back down at his book. The teenager near the back wall pulled one earbud out and left it out. The young mother, managing her toddler on her hip, looked at Craig with the expression of a woman who has been awake since 4 a.m. and has no patience left for performances. A couple near the window exchanged a look and said nothing, which was its own kind of answer. The room was not with him. Craig stood with that for 3 seconds. Then he made the move that changed everything. He reached down and took Dorothy's arm. He would say later that he had not meant to be rough. He had meant to take her arm, steady and firm, the way you help someone up who has been sitting somewhere they should not be sitting. He had not thought about her age. He had not thought about her bones. He had reached for her the way he reached for things with the assumption that whatever he touched would cooperate with being moved. His hand closed around her forearm. He pulled just once, just slightly forward. Her glasses left her face. The frame caught the terminal light for one brief second as they skidded across the polished floor. Her handbag dropped. She lurched forward, one hand going out to steady herself against the armrest. The gate area erupted, not in noise exactly, but in motion. Gasps, a sharp intake of breath from 2 directions simultaneously. The young mother stepped back, pulling her toddler with her. Rosa Delgado was on her feet before she had consciously decided to stand. Tyler Reeves swung his phone up, no longer subtle, openly filming his voice low and steady into the camera. He just grabbed her. That is on footage. That happened. Priya Okafor was already uploading. Her hands were shaking, not from fear she would realize later, but from anger. Pure and clean and cold. Kevin Marsh behind the desk had the radio in his hand. Craig let go. He stepped back. He looked at the glasses on the floor and then at Dorothy, and something crossed his face that was not quite what he expected to feel, a flash of something that might have been alarm if he had let himself name it. He did not name it. Dorothy did not cry. She did not raise her voice. She did not look at her arm or at the floor or at the people around her who had risen to their feet. She straightened in her chair. She looked at Craig, and she said quiet enough that only the 3 rows closest could hear, but in a voice with no tremor in it whatsoever. You are going to wish you had not done that. Not a threat, a statement. The difference was entirely audible. Rosa Delgado, 3 feet away, heard it. She sat back down slowly. She looked at Dorothy with an expression that had moved a long way from concern and arrived somewhere closer to recognition. Tyler had 700 live viewers and counting. Priya's phone showed a notification from her sister in Chicago. I posted it. It is already moving. Kevin Marsh came out from behind the desk for the first time that shift. She did not think about Craig Whitfield in that moment. She thought about a library. A Tuesday afternoon in September 1975. She was 27 years old. First-year law student at Vanderbilt. One of 6 black students in her entering class, and she was sitting in her usual spot in the main reading room, end of the 3rd row, the seat with the good light and the short walk to the reference shelves. She had been there for 3 hours. She had a property law exam in 4 days and a constitutional theory paper due the week after that, and she was by any reasonable measure exactly where she was supposed to be. A professor stopped beside her table. White man, late 50s, the kind of tweedy authority that carried itself with the assumption that every space it entered already belonged to it. He did not ask if she was a student. He looked at her and said, with the particular patient tone of a man explaining something to someone who has made an understandable mistake, "The library reading room is reserved for law students and faculty. The public study rooms are on the 4th floor." She had looked up at him with the same clear, steady expression she would spend the next 5 decades perfecting. She had taken out her student ID and placed it on the table between them. He had looked at it the way Craig Whitfield would look at an airport seat, as an inconvenience rather than evidence. He had cleared his throat. He had walked away. She had stayed until the reading room closed. She thought about the morning after her first federal ruling. She had been 43. The case had taken 11 months, and the ruling had not been the easy one, had not been the safe one, had been the one that was correct, and that she had been willing to put her name to permanently. Afterward, in the corridor, a senior attorney from the opposing counsel had stopped her. He was not a bad man, she would decide later. He was simply a man who had not yet recalibrated the world to include her in it. He had said with genuine surprise in his voice, "You were very effective up there." She had looked at him. She had said yes. "I know." She had walked to the elevator alone, and she had not let herself smile until the doors had closed completely. She had spent her entire career in rooms that had already decided something about her before she opened her mouth. Rooms that had assigned her a category and a ceiling before she had said a word. She had spent 40 years walking into those rooms and belonging in them anyway. Not loudly, not as performance, just competently and precisely and without apology, until the room adjusted its expectations to her rather than the other way around. She had never asked permission to be where she was. She had simply been there, doing the work until the world caught up. She thought about Raymond, her husband Raymond, who had died 8 years ago at 74 peacefully, and in their own bedroom in Memphis, in the house they had lived in for 31 years. Raymond, who had taught high school history for 38 years, and who had had a specific gift for making 15-year-olds feel like the study of the past was the most urgent and alive thing in the world. Raymond, who had said to her once, not long after they married Dorothy, "You could sit in a hurricane and make it feel like it had to go around you." She had laughed at that. She laughed, remembering it now, sitting in gate 22 with her handbag back in her lap and Craig Whitfield still somewhere in her peripheral vision, and her glasses on the floor 8 feet away, waiting for someone to retrieve them. Raymond, she thought. You should see this man. He would have said exactly 3 words about him, none of them kind. And she thought about Amara. Amara, at age 9, sitting at Dorothy's kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon, asking questions, the way she always asked questions relentlessly, and in sequence each answer producing the next question immediately. She had asked Grandma, "Why do you wear a black robe?" Dorothy had explained. The bench, the court, the meaning of the role. Amara had gone very still with the focused gravity that 9-year-olds produce when something has landed in them as genuinely important. Then she had said, "You are in charge of what is fair." Dorothy had said, "I try to be." Amara had thought about this for a long moment. "Then I want to do that too." She had never changed her mind. Not through high school, not through undergrad at Howard, where she waited tables 3 nights a week and still graduated with honors, not through the 2 rejections before the acceptance, not through the 11 months of first year that she had described to Dorothy on the phone as the hardest thing she had ever done in her life, and the thing she was most certain she was going to finish. She had called Dorothy at 3 in the morning from the Columbia Law School admissions parking lot. She had been crying so hard that the first 30 seconds of the call was just breathing and static. Dorothy had said, "Slow down, baby. Tell me." And Amara had said in a voice that was trying to be steady and was not quite there yet, "Grandma." "I got in," Dorothy had cried too. Alone in her kitchen in Memphis at 3 in the morning, standing at the counter with a cup of coffee she had poured and forgotten. Crying quietly and completely crying, because this was the thing they had been building toward. Every case, every ruling, every Saturday afternoon at the kitchen table, explaining what justice meant and why it was worth spending your life on. Every piece of it. For this. She was not going to miss that graduation, not for a delay, not for Craig Whitfield and his carry-on and his voice and his hand on her arm, not for anything in this gate area or outside of it. She was going to be in that auditorium in 2 days in the 3rd row, and she was going to watch Amara walk across that stage, and Craig Whitfield was going to be so thoroughly forgotten by then that she would have to work to remember his name. She was entirely certain of this. She had been certain of harder things. Craig had stepped back. He had not stepped away. He stood several feet from Dorothy's chair with the particular stillness of a man who has not yet decided he is finished. Kevin Marsh had come out from behind the desk and was moving toward the row, his radio in his hand, his expression careful and professional and tight around the edges. Dorothy's glasses had been retrieved by the young mother who had handed them to Dorothy without saying anything, just placed them gently in her hands, with a look that said everything she did not need to put into words. Dorothy had put them back on her face. She had folded her hands over her handbag. She had looked at the departures board. Craig pulled out his phone, not to call the airline. He called Daniel Holt, his assistant. And what he did next was the thing that shifted something permanently in the gate area, more than the grab, more than the raised voice, more than the threat. He stood within full earshot of Dorothy, and he used her as the subject of a work call. "Yeah," he said. "Still at O'Hare. Listen, there is an old woman who will not give up a seat. I have tried. She is just being difficult. No, it is a gate area thing. Can you find out if there is a United Club lounge in this terminal? Just see if I can get access." He paused. "Right. And call Marcus's office and let them know I may be 5 minutes late to the setup. The delay is United's fault, not mine." He was not speaking to Dorothy. He was not looking at her. She was not there in his accounting of the situation. She was the old woman being difficult, a logistical inconvenience to be worked around a subordinate clause in a call about something more important. Rosa Delgado, listening, felt something settle in her jaw. The young mother shifted her toddler to her other hip and watched Craig with the flat, unimpressed attention of a woman who has run out of the benefit of the doubt. Craig ended the call. He turned back toward Dorothy with a new approach, his voice shifting into the register that men like him use when they have decided to be strategic about their condescension. Helpful, patient, reasonable. "I am going to be honest with you," he said. "I am thinking about your comfort here. You have been in this gate area for a long time. The desk is much less crowded. You would have more space, fewer people around you. I just think you would be more comfortable over there." He said it with genuine care in his voice. That was the worst part. The condescension was so complete that he had wrapped it in the costume of concern and presented it as a gift. Dorothy looked at him for a moment that lasted longer than he expected. Then she said, "My comfort is fine exactly where I am. Thank you." Tyler Reeves was at 1,400 live viewers. He read the number quietly into his phone. He did not editorialize. He did not need to. Craig looked at the cameras, Tyler's and the phone of the young mother and the one that had appeared in the hands of the older man in the navy suit. He looked at Kevin Marsh, who had stopped several feet away and was watching. He looked at Rosa Delgado, who was looking at him with the kind of expression that does not leave room for misreading. He made the worst decision of the morning, perhaps the worst decision of his professional life. He raised his voice. Not at Dorothy. At the gate area, at the desk, loud enough to carry, loud enough to be heard clearly by everyone in the 2 nearest rows and several beyond. "I need to formally report," he said, "that this passenger is being disruptive and may need assistance." He used the word assistance in the particular way that implies something beyond physical that suggests impairment. Confusion, diminished capacity. He was not saying Dorothy was confused. He was suggesting it publicly in a room full of strangers in a voice designed to land that suggestion in as many ears as possible. It was the most calculated thing he had done all morning, and it was designed to reframe Dorothy's dignity as a symptom of something that needed managing. The gate area went hard. Hard in the specific way of a room that has been watching something build and has just seen it cross a line that cannot be uncrossed. Rosa Delgado stood up before she decided to stand. She stepped into the open space between Craig and Dorothy, not rushing, not loud, but fully present and entirely immovable. "That woman," Rosa said, and her voice was flat and even and carrying is not confused. "That woman has been sitting calmly in that chair for over 2 hours while you have been throwing a tantrum for 25 minutes. There is nothing wrong with her. There is something wrong with you." Craig looked at her. "Who are you?" "She has been sitting next to me all morning," Rosa said. "That makes it my business." Craig told her to mind her own affairs. Rosa did not move. She crossed her arms. She had the stance of someone who had spent the last 4 years learning which things were worth the energy and which were not, and had arrived at the answer to that question definitively in this particular moment. While Rosa held the space between them, Dorothy did something deliberate and entirely unhurried. She reached into her handbag. She took out a small leather card case worn at the edges the way something gets after years of daily use. She opened it and removed a single card. She did not show it to Craig. She did not hold it up for the room. She placed it face down on the empty seat beside her, the seat Craig's bag had been on, the seat he had claimed by carry-on and then lost. She placed the card there. She closed the card case. She put it back in her handbag. She folded her hands and looked at the departures board. She did not explain the card. She did not say anything. Craig stared at it, face down on the seat, small and white and still. He did not pick it up. Something passed through his expression that had not been there before. Not fear precisely, but the first hairline crack of uncertainty. The feeling of ground that has shifted very slightly beneath your feet. Not enough to fall, but enough to notice. Kevin Marsh noticed it too. He looked at the card, and then at Dorothy, and then he made a quiet decision that had nothing to do with gate protocol or airline procedures and everything to do with being a 28-year-old man who still believed that some things were simply not acceptable. He walked to the seat, picked up the card, and read it. His face went very still, then very careful. The careful expression of someone who has just recognized that what they are dealing with is significantly larger than what they thought they were dealing with. He looked at Captain James Norris, who had been standing near the service corridor for the past several minutes, arms crossed, watching. Norris was already moving. Tyler Reeves read the viewer count to his phone. 4,200, he said, still quiet, still steady, and climbing. Tyler Reeves had pressed record 12 minutes ago and had not lowered his phone since. He was not doing it for drama. He was not doing it because he had a narrative arc planned or a title card ready or a strategy for the clip's engagement. He was doing it because he had 67,000 subscribers who followed him for exactly this reason, because he went places and he paid attention, and he showed people what he saw, and what he was seeing right now at Gate 22 of O'Hare Airport was something that needed to be seen. His voice into the camera was low and steady. "We are at O'Hare International Gate 22. A man has been harassing an elderly woman for over 20 minutes over an airport seat. She has not moved." He grabbed her arm. "I caught that on footage. We are now at 4,000 viewers live." He paused. 500. He paused again. The viewer count was climbing faster than he could read it. Priya Okafor had been filming differently. Her phone had been in the side pocket of her laptop bag, angled upward, barely visible, because Priya was not a content creator and had never intended to go viral, and had in fact sent the first clip to her sister in Chicago with the caption, "This is happening right now," intending it to be exactly that, a private message to one person. Her sister, who had 180,000 TikTok followers and a very quick read of what the internet wanted to see, had added the caption, "He grabbed Grandma's arm over an airport seat," and posted it before Priya had finished watching the first replay. The notification Priya received 3 minutes later, showing 4,000 shares, made her sit very still for a moment. Then 9,000. Then she stopped refreshing and set the phone face down in her lap and looked at Dorothy sitting in her chair 12 feet away, handbag in both hands. left hand trembling entirely unrattled, and felt something she did not have a clean name for. Not guilt, exactly. More like the particular weight of having pointed a very bright light at something without fully understanding in the moment of pointing how bright the light was or how wide an area it would illuminate. She looked at the card Dorothy had placed on the seat beside her. Still face down, still unexplained. The gate area had reorganized itself. This is the thing about public confrontations that build slowly. The shift does not happen all at once. It happens in increments in the accumulated small decisions of individual people choosing not to look away anymore. The man who had his back turned was now fully facing the confrontation. The older couple near the window had in the last several minutes moved their chairs a few inches closer, not dramatically, not in a way you would notice if you were not paying attention, but deliberately the way people move when they have decided they are no longer going to pretend they are not watching. The young mother had shifted position so that her body was between her toddler and Craig, and she was openly holding her phone up, now no longer discreet. The gate area had become something. Not a mob, not a protest. Something older and simpler than both of those things. A room full of people who had decided they were witnesses. Kevin Marsh stood behind the desk with the card in his hand and his radio already keyed. He spoke into it quietly, 5 words, and nobody in the gate area could hear what he said. He lowered the radio. He looked at Dorothy. He looked at the door to the service corridor. Then he stepped out from behind the desk fully for the first time and walked toward Captain Norris, who was already moving away from the wall. Craig had seen the cameras. He registered Tyler's phone first openly raised live streaming viewer count mounting. He took a step toward Tyler. "Put that down," he said. Sir Tyler said, calm and even, "This is a public space. You have no expectation of privacy in a public terminal." Craig turned and saw the mother, saw the older man, saw the phone that had appeared in the hands of a woman near the back row he had not even noticed before. The room was covered, every angle. Every word he had said in the last 25 minutes had been recorded by multiple devices and was currently being watched by people he could not count. He made the calculation he always made in rooms. For the first time in a very long time, the math did not favor him. Something in his face shifted. The performance of confidence cracked slightly at its edges. He was still standing. He was still Craig Whitfield. But the room had stopped being a room he controlled and had become something else entirely, a room that was watching him, and that was watching him the way people watch something they have decided they need to remember. He turned back to Dorothy. He was not finished. He was not capable in that moment of being finished. But the certainty in his posture had changed its quality. It was no longer the certainty of a man who has never been told no. It was the certainty of a man who knows he is losing and does not know yet how to stop. Craig made one last attempt. He stood in front of Dorothy again. Kevin Marsh was 6 feet away. Captain Norris was watching from 12 feet back, arms at his sides, not yet moved. Still assessing, still giving the moment the space it needed. Tyler's viewer count was over 5,000. The gate area was entirely still in the way that happens when a room has collectively decided that whatever is about to happen matters. Craig's voice was low, controlled. The scariest version of himself, the one that came out when all the other versions had failed. "I do not know what you think you are accomplishing," he said. "You have made a scene. You have inconvenienced everyone in this gate. You have put yourself in a very difficult position. All I am asking is for a simple common thing. Walk away now and this ends here. That is all this has to be." He said it like it was a kindness, like he was offering her an exit she should be grateful for. Dorothy looked at him. She looked at him the way she had looked at defendants and at attorneys, and at colleagues, and at the men who had told her over her 40-year career in 100 different rooms, in 100 different ways that she was somewhere she did not belong. She had that look. She had refined it over decades. It was not unkind. It was simply clear the way a window is clear, nothing between you and what is on the other side. She said, "I raised 3 children, and I'm going to tell you what I told every single one of them when they behaved like this." She paused, not for effect, for precision. "Sit down. Take a breath. The world is not going to end because you did not get what you wanted. And if you had been raised by someone who loved you enough to tell you that you would be embarrassed right now. She did not raise her voice. She did not gesture. She delivered each sentence with the same quiet weight she had used to deliver rulings from the bench for 19 years. The weight of a person who has thought carefully about what they are about to say and is now simply saying it. The gate area did not erupt. That would have been too easy, too cinematic, too clean. What happened was something smaller and more real. It was an exhale, collective and involuntary. 15 people releasing a breath simultaneously, the particular sound of a room that has just been told exactly what it needed to hear. Rosa Delgado put her hand over her mouth, not to suppress a smile, but to hold herself back from saying something out loud that she very much wanted to say. The man with the paperback looked up from his book and did not look back down. Somewhere near the back of the gate area, a woman whispered something to the man beside her, and he nodded without looking away from Dorothy. Tyler read the viewer count into his phone, barely audible 7,400. Craig's mouth opened. He had an answer somewhere. He always had an answer. But what came out was not an answer. It was not even a sentence. It was the sound a person makes when the thing they were reaching for is simply not there. He took one step forward, not toward Dorothy, not at her, not with his hands. Just one step, the unconscious forward movement of a man whose body has outpaced his decision-making, who has run out of words and reached toward something else without being entirely sure what it was. That step was the thing Captain James Norris had been waiting for. He had been watching for 20 minutes. He had the particular stillness of a man who has made a decision in his mind and is waiting for the moment when acting on it is both necessary and correct. That moment had arrived. He uncrossed his arms. He walked forward. He stepped into the open space between Craig Whitfield and Dorothy Henson with the unhurried certainty of a man occupying ground he has decided is now his responsibility. He was not large. Medium height, silver at his temples, reading glasses in his breast pocket. But he had the presence of someone who has learned over 24 years of flying that size is the least interesting form of authority. He looked at Craig. "Sir," he said. Captain James Norris had been flying for United Airlines for 24 years. He had handled engine failures at altitude and emergency landings in weather that would have unmade a less composed man. He had managed a passenger medical crisis at 35,000 feet with no doctor on board and a cabin full of frightened people who needed someone to look calm even when calm was the last thing the situation warranted. He had the particular composure of a person who has learned that the moment a situation controls you instead of the other way around, people get hurt. He had been at Gate 22 to check a paperwork discrepancy with Kevin before heading to his aircraft. He had heard Craig Whitfield before he saw him. He had been watching from near the service corridor for 18 minutes. He had the particular patience of a man who waits for the right moment. Craig turned. He registered the uniform. Something shifted in his posture, a micro-adjustment, the body of a man recalibrating to a new variable. Pilot. Authority. Someone worth adjusting the volume for. "Captain," he said, and the word had a thin veneer of civility stretched over something that was still tight and coiled. "I hope you can help me here. I have been trying to make a simple request and have been," I heard Norris said. He said it cleanly, cutting off the rest of the sentence without raising his voice. "I have been standing over there for 18 minutes. I heard all of it." Craig paused. "Then you know what I have been dealing with." Norris looked at him for a moment. Then he turned to Dorothy. His expression, when it moved toward her, changed by one precise degree, just enough to be read clearly by anyone watching. "Ma'am," he said, "I'm sorry you had to sit through this." Dorothy nodded once. "Thank you." Craig's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me, you are apologizing to her." "I am Norris," said. He turned back to Craig, and his voice was the same thing it had been from the beginning, even controlled warm in temperature, but not in content. The voice of a man who is not going to change his position. "Mr. Whitfield," he said, "I'm going to ask you to take a step back right now. I am not going to—" That was not a suggestion, Norris said. His voice did not change volume, did not change pace, did not change by a single quality that would give Craig something to push against. "Take a step back." The gate area was so quiet that the toddler making a small sound near the windows seemed to come from somewhere else entirely. Craig looked at Norris. Norris looked back at him. The eyes of a man who had been first in a room of frightened people at 35,000 feet and had never once looked away first. Craig took a step back. It was small. The gate area noticed it. The slight redistribution of Craig's weight, the fraction of ground he conceded without being able to name what he had just lost. Norris reached up and pressed the small radio clipped near his collar. He spoke into it 5 words too quiet for anyone in the gate area to hear clearly. He lowered his hand. He looked at Craig with the expression of a man who has made a decision and is entirely at peace with it. "Mr. Whitfield," he said, "I would like you to come with me to the desk, please." Craig straightened. "I am not going." Norris said his name again. Same tone, same patience. "Right now, please." There was something in that please. The specific weight of a please that is not a please at all, but is the final moment before something changes permanently. Even Craig Whitfield, who had built his life on refusing to respond to that kind of pressure, could not find his footing against it. He picked up his carry-on. He looked at Dorothy one last time. She was not looking at him. She had turned her eyes back to the departures board handbag resting in both hands, left hand doing its small and constant trembling. He looked at her for 2 seconds. Then he followed Norris toward the desk. The gate area breathed, not all at once. In sequence, the way people exhale when a thing that has been pressing against them has moved. Rosa sat back in her chair. The man with the paperback looked at Rosa. Rosa looked at Dorothy. Dorothy looked at the departures board. Something in her face had not changed since the beginning of this, but something behind it had settled the way a fire settles after it has been fed, still burning smaller controlled. From somewhere near the back of the gate area, one person began to clap. Slow, deliberate, not mocking, real. Then a second. Then 5. It did not become a full ovation. It did not need to. Dorothy heard it. She did not turn around. But the almost smile was there, small and private, and entirely genuine, the smile of a woman who has held her ground so many times that it does not surprise her when the ground holds back. Kevin Marsh had the card in his hand. He had picked it up from the seat where Dorothy had placed it face down, and he had read it, and his face had done the thing that faces do when they encounter something that rearranges their understanding of a situation they thought they already understood. It went very still, then very careful. The careful expression of someone who has just recognized that what they are dealing with is significantly larger than what they thought they were dealing with. He showed it to Captain Norris, quietly shielding it from Craig's sightline. Norris read it. He looked at Kevin. Kevin looked back. Neither of them spoke for 2 seconds. Then Kevin picked up the desk phone and made a call. The call lasted 45 seconds. Then the overhead speaker crackled. "Attention passengers at Gate 22. United Flight 1847 to New York LaGuardia has been canceled. All passengers please proceed to the customer service desk for rebooking assistance. We apologize for the inconvenience." The gate area came apart. 51 people in motion at once. Chairs scraped, bags grabbed. Voices collided into each other in the specific chaos that only airports produce when the one thing people have been holding on to, the departure time on the board, the illusion that they are still going somewhere, has been taken away. "What do you mean canceled? I have a connection in LaGuardia. This is unbelievable. This is absolutely unbelievable." Craig stood at the desk with his hand on his carry-on and his face moving through colors rapidly red, then something close to white, then settling into a flat gray that did not suit him. He was looking at Norris. "You did this," he said. His voice had lost its edges. It was almost quiet. "The flight was canceled due to a disruptive passenger," Norris said. "That is airline protocol. It is not an individual decision. It is the duty manager's decision based on the reported situation." "You reported it." "I did," Norris said. Craig stared at him. His jaw worked. His eyes moved from Norris to Kevin to the back of the gate area where the crowd was pressing toward the desk in a knot of frustrated, exhausted people. "Do you understand what you have done? I have a board meeting in 4 hours. I have a deal worth $40 million waiting for me in New York. I have been building toward this meeting for 18 months. Norris's voice did not change. What I did was respond to a situation in which a passenger was physically aggressive toward an elderly woman in a public terminal. I want you to understand that clearly. That is what happened. That is what was reported. The word physically landed. Craig blinked, and then the service corridor door opened and Susan Park walked through it, moving fast. Susan Park was 47. She was the head of customer experience for United's Midwest region, and she had been watching the situation on terminal security footage for 14 minutes. She had Dorothy's card information in her hand. She had already made 3 calls. She knew exactly who Dorothy Mae Henson was. She went to Dorothy first. She did not go to the desk, did not go to Norris, did not go to Craig. She walked directly to the corner chair where Dorothy sat, and she crouched down to Dorothy's level, and she said quietly and without preamble, "Mrs. Henson. My name is Susan Park. I am so sorry. We are going to take care of everything." She held up the small white card with the government seal. "We know who you are." Dorothy looked at her. She looked at the card being returned to her. She took it and put it back in her handbag. Susan stood up. She turned toward Kevin. "Get Mrs. Henson rebooked on the next direct to LaGuardia. First class, no charge." She turned toward Craig. "Now," she said, "you and I need to speak." Dorothy Mae Henson had retired from the federal bench 3 years ago. After retirement, she had accepted her appointment to the Citizens Aviation Standards Board, a federal oversight body empowered to audit airlines, investigate passenger rights complaints, and recommend regulatory enforcement action to the Department of Transportation. She had published 3 formal reports in her first 2 years on the board. 2 of them had resulted in fines. One had resulted in a restructuring of a carrier's boarding procedures that affected 300 airports. She did not put this on her handbag. She did not introduce herself with it. She had one card, plain white, government seal. She had placed it on the seat beside her face down, not as a threat, but as a quiet preparation. She had known from the moment Craig Whitfield stood in front of her that the morning was going to resolve itself one way or another. She had simply been patient enough to let it. But there was one more thing. One more layer that Craig did not know and that would not become clear to him until Susan Park turned her tablet toward him at the desk. Dorothy Mae Henson had known Marcus Webb for 22 years. Marcus Webb, 58, chairman of Pinnacle Investment Group, the firm with the $40 million development deal Craig Whitfield had been flying to New York to pitch. They had met when Dorothy was still on the bench at a civic leadership dinner in Memphis in 2002. They had stayed in contact. They had served together on a nonprofit board for 6 years. Marcus Webb was one of 4 people Dorothy called when Raymond died. He had flown to Memphis for the funeral. Susan Park told Craig all of this at the desk in a voice that was flat and professional and gave him nowhere to hide. She turned the tablet toward him and showed him the security footage. The grab, the glasses on the floor, Dorothy's hands after. She told him the board meeting had been postponed. She used the word indefinitely. Craig looked at the tablet. He looked at his own hands on the footage. He looked at the word indefinitely, and he understood in a way that had nothing to do with the airline, or the protocols, or the cameras, or the hashtag that was already building with his name, that the morning had cost him something he was not going to be able to buy back. He said nothing. Susan said, "The footage has been preserved. Staff accounts have been documented. I strongly recommend you contact our legal team before end of business today." She handed him a card. He took it. He looked once across the chaos of the gate area toward the corner seat. Dorothy was no longer there. Kevin had taken her to the desk. She was getting her new boarding pass. She was going to New York. Craig stood with the card in his hand and did not move for a long time. The rebooking line was moving. Kevin Marsh had gone back behind the desk and was working with the focused intensity of a man performing surgery under difficult conditions, typing fast, speaking in the even and reassuring tones of a gate agent who has done this before and intends to do it well, even when it is hard. He had 2 agents beside him now, and the line was long and loud and restless and he was moving through it with a steadiness that had nothing to do with the situation being easy and everything to do with him having decided it was his job to make it less hard for the people in front of him. Rosa Delgado had not joined the line. She had come to stand beside Dorothy simply and without announcement, the way you stand beside someone after something has happened that does not need to be discussed yet. They sat together for a moment in the reorganized chaos of Gate 22, and they were quiet. Then Dorothy said, "My granddaughter is graduating from Columbia Law School in 2 days." Rosa looked at her. She smiled. "That is a big thing." "Her name is Amara," Dorothy said. "She is going to be a remarkable lawyer." Rosa was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Sounds like she comes from someone who knows how to hold her ground." Dorothy made the almost smile. "Rosa said I am going to see my first grandchild, 3 weeks old. Dorothy said, the universe probably wanted you at this gate this morning." Rosa looked at her. Then she laughed a real laugh startled out of her, genuine and warm. "I'm going to tell my daughter that," she said. "She will not believe me." Tyler Reeves had ended his live stream at 11,200 viewers. He was sitting in his seat looking at his phone with an expression that had gone past surprised and into something more sober. The clip his sister had posted was at 67,000 shares. He had seen Craig's face clearly in multiple frames. He had seen the glasses skid across the floor. He had seen Dorothy's left hand shaking after. Priya Okafor was looking at her notifications and had stopped reading the comments after the first 2 minutes because there were too many of them and they were arriving faster than she could process. Most of them were for Dorothy. The angry ones were for Craig. A few were speculating about who Dorothy was. Someone had zoomed in on the card Dorothy placed on the seat and was trying to read the seal. Kevin came out from behind the desk. He walked to Dorothy, directly boarding pass already in his hand. "Mrs. Henson," he said. His voice was careful and sincere and a little tired. The voice of a young man who has been doing this work since 5 in the morning and has just watched something happen that he did not know how to fit into the category of things he had prepared for. "We have a seat for you. First class direct to LaGuardia. Leaves from gate H14 in 90 minutes. He held out the boarding pass over the desk. His hand, as he passed it to hers, was entirely steady. "Your granddaughter is going to be very proud of you, ma'am," he said. Dorothy took the boarding pass and put it in her handbag. "She is the one graduating," she said. "I am just going to watch." Kevin almost smiled. "Still," he said. Susan Park walked Craig to the terminal corridor. She did not do it publicly. She did not make a performance of it. She simply guided him toward the corridor door with the quiet authority of a woman who is very good at her job and is currently doing it under circumstances she finds personally objectionable. She showed him the footage one more time. She watched him look at himself on the screen. She said United will cooperate fully with any investigation. The footage is preserved. Every staff member who witnessed the confrontation has been asked to provide a written account. The flight cancellation was authorized and appropriate under our safety protocols. She paused. "Mrs. Henson has been provided a first-class seat on the next direct flight to LaGuardia. She will be in New York in time for her granddaughter's graduation." Craig closed his eyes for 2 seconds. "Good," he said. The word came out unsteady, like something being dragged. "I am glad she will make it." Susan studied him. She handed him the card. She said, "Safe travels, Mr. Whitfield." She walked back toward the terminal. When Dorothy's gate was called over the PA, she stood up. She smoothed her coat. She picked up her handbag. From somewhere in the crowded, disrupted, frustrated Gate 22, a single person began to clap. Then 3. Then 12. Not performed, not organized. The kind of applause that comes out of people before they have decided to produce it. Dorothy did not turn around. She walked toward the corridor with Rosa walking 2 steps beside her. Her left hand trembled at her side, steady as it always was, undefeated as it had always been. Rosa walked with her to the corridor entrance. She stopped there. They looked at each other. "Give that granddaughter a hug from a stranger," Rosa said. "I will," Dorothy said. "And you go hold that baby." They stood for a moment, two women who had not known each other 4 hours ago in the middle of a day that had been terrible and then unexpectedly had become something else entirely. Then Dorothy walked toward the jetway. She did not look back. She never looked back. Craig Whitfield stood in the terminal corridor for a full 30 seconds without moving. The airport moved around him the way airports always move, indifferent and relentless, full of its own noise and urgency. A family rushed past him pulling wheeled suitcases. A gate agent made an announcement over the PA. Someone's coffee cup hit the floor 20 feet away and burst open. He looked at the card in his hand, the airline legal team's number, and did not put it in his pocket for a long moment. He called Daniel. Daniel Holt had been trying to reach him for 40 minutes. He answered before the second ring. "The video has 90,000 shares," he said. His voice was careful, the voice of someone stepping across uncertain ground. Craig said nothing. "Craig?" Daniel paused. Marcus Webb called. Craig turned toward the wall. He pressed his free hand flat against the back of his neck. What did he say? He said he saw the footage. He said the meeting is postponed. His voice was careful, not angry. Careful. Craig knew the difference. He had been in enough rooms with enough powerful men to understand that careful was worse than angry. Angry had edges you could argue against. Careful had already arrived at its conclusion and was working out how to deliver it. He said indefinitely, Craig asked. He said, "Call me when you're ready to have an honest conversation about what happened today." Not before. Craig stood with that. The $40 million. 18 months of preparation. 11 rehearsals of the pitch. The deal that was supposed to change the shape of his company's next decade. All of it sitting behind the word indefinitely. He ended the call. He started walking. He walked the way he always walked in airports, forward fast. The body language of a man who is going somewhere important, and everything between him and that place is an obstacle to be navigated. Except that today, for the first time, the purposeful stride felt like a performance he was putting on for an audience that was no longer watching. He was the only one who could see it. That made it worse. A text arrived from a number he did not have saved. He almost did not open it. Something made him stop and look. "Mr. Whitfield, my name is Amara Henson. I am the granddaughter of the woman you assaulted at gate 22 this morning. I am a law student at Columbia. I want you to know that I have already spoken with attorneys who specialize in personal injury cases. I have seen the footage. My grandmother is on her way to New York. Do not contact her directly." Craig read it twice. He put his phone in his pocket. He kept walking faster now, the wheels of his carry-on loud on the polished floor. She was a law student, not a lawyer. She was 24 years old. She was scared and angry and had sent that message from 500 miles away. She was probably bluffing. Probably. He called Daniel back. "I need a lawyer. I already called one, Sarah Kim, Chicago. She is available this afternoon. Tell her I will call from the gate." Craig. "There is one more thing." Daniel's voice had gone very quiet. "There is a text from Marcus. It came through an hour ago. It reads, Craig, I have known Dorothy Henson for 22 years. She is one of the finest people I have ever met and one of the most important people in aviation oversight in this country. Whatever the business situation, this is not something I can look past. The meeting will be rescheduled when I believe we are both in a position to have a productive conversation. I hope you take the time between now and then to think carefully." Craig stopped walking in the middle of the corridor. He stood still. People moved around him, parting and rejoining like water around a stone. He did not notice them. He thought about something Daniel had said to him once, 18 months ago, at the end of a long client dinner after everyone else had gone, when it was just the two of them and the last of a bottle of wine, and the particular honesty that comes late at night when the performance has run out of fuel. Daniel had said, quietly, without malice, but without softening it either. "You know what your problem is, Craig? You got successful before you got human, and now you do not know which order those things are supposed to go in." Craig had laughed it off. He had said something sharp and deflecting. Daniel had let him. They had paid the bill and gone home. He was not laughing now. He thought about his mother. She had raised him alone after his father left 2 jobs, nothing complained about in front of him. She had been at every school event, every game, every late night at the kitchen table when he needed help with something he had left until the last minute. She had died 6 years ago. He had been in a meeting when the hospital called. He had finished the meeting first. He had told no one that. He had not let himself think about it directly since the day it happened. He was thinking about it now, standing in O'Hare with his name in a hashtag and 90,000 people having watched him grab an old woman's arm over an airport seat. His mother had had a way about her, a specific quality of dignity that did not require an audience and did not perform itself. She had said things to him when he was young that he had heard and filed away and had not let himself remember in a long time. One of them surfaced now unbidden and entirely clear. The measure of a man is how he treats people who cannot give him anything. He reached Terminal 3. He found his gate. He sat down in the first available seat. Not the corner seat, not the one with the best light and the open space, just a seat. He opened his phone. He found Amara's message. He stared at it for a long time. Then he began to type. He typed for 4 minutes without stopping. He did not edit it. He read it back once. He pressed send. Miss Henson, I am not asking for forgiveness, and I am not writing to ask for anything. I want to say clearly that what I did this morning was wrong. I grabbed your grandmother's arm because I was angry, and I believed I was entitled to something I had no right to, and I treated her as if she were in the way rather than as a person. That is the truth of it. The whole morning is the truth of it. I watched your grandmother hold her ground against me with more dignity than I have shown anyone in a very long time. She deserved none of what I put her through. I am sorry. Not for what this is costing me, for what I did to her. I hope she gets to see you graduate. He put the phone in his pocket. He sat back. He looked out the window at the tarmac. Outside, a plane taxied slowly across the flat gray morning unhurried, certain of its direction. He sat with the question that had no quick answer. What kind of man do you want to be on the other side of this? He did not know yet, but he was asking it. For the first time in longer than he could honestly account for, he was actually asking it. And asking it he knew without being able to explain how he knew was where everything either ended or began. The first-class cabin smelled like clean air and leather. Dorothy stood in the aisle for a moment before finding her seat. She had flown first class once before on her 40th wedding anniversary when Raymond had upgraded them at the gate without telling her, appearing at her elbow with 2 new boarding passes and that particular look he had when he was pleased with himself. She had told him it was too expensive. He had said, Dorothy, we have been married for 40 years. Let me have this one. She sat down. The seat had actual room on both sides. The headrest met the back of her head at exactly the right height. Outside the small oval window, the ordinary gray morning of O'Hare spread across the tarmac, ground crews, and fuel carts, and the slow mechanical world of an airport at work. She watched it for a moment. Then she let out a breath she had been holding since 5:30 in the morning when her alarm went off in the Memphis Marriott where she had stayed the night before to be close to the airport. A flight attendant appeared beside her. Young dark hair pulled back, eyes that were professionally warm and also, Dorothy noted, genuinely kind. There was a difference between those two things. Dorothy had always been able to tell them apart. Mrs. Henson, the attendant said, Welcome aboard. Can I get you anything before we push back? How do you know my name? Dorothy asked. The gate agent called ahead, the attendant said. He wanted to make sure you were taken care of. She paused. He also asked me to pass along his congratulations about your granddaughter. Dorothy was quiet for a moment. She pressed her lips together once, not with sadness, but with the specific pressure of a feeling that has no clean name, gratitude and grief, and something sweet folded into a single point behind the eyes. That was very kind of him, she said. Coffee, the attendant said gently. Please, Black. The attendant moved away. Dorothy looked out the window at the tarmac. She did not think about Craig Whitfield. She had filed him the way she filed things that were finished completely and without residue. She thought about Amara. She thought about the phone call from the Columbia parking lot at 3 in the morning, the crying so hard the words would not form. Dorothy saying, "Slow down, baby, tell me." And then, finally, the words arriving through the tears, "Grandma." I got in. Dorothy had been standing at her kitchen counter in Memphis with a cup of coffee that had gone cold, and she had said quietly into the phone, "I know, sweetheart. I know you did." And she had meant it, not as comfort, as fact. She had known Amara was going to get in the way she knew certain things, not because she had calculated the odds, but because she had watched Amara become herself piece by piece, year by year, and the person Amara was becoming had always been going to this place. She pulled her sleeve back slightly and looked at her forearm. The bruise was there, 4 finger-shaped shadows deepening toward purple. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she pulled her sleeve down and smoothed it flat with the precise finality of a woman closing a chapter. She was done with that. The coffee arrived. Dorothy wrapped both hands around the cup and held it the way you hold something that is uncomplicated warmth and let herself be still for the first time since the Memphis Marriott at 5:30 in the morning. The plane began to move. She looked out the window at O'Hare falling away beneath the early clouds. She thought about Amara in her cap and gown. She thought about the auditorium. She thought about Raymond, who would have been in that auditorium in the 3rd row with his reading glasses and his quiet pride, and that particular look he got when something he had believed in for a long time turned out to be right. She was carrying him there. She was carrying all of it. The clouds closed over Chicago below her. New York was ahead. Amara Henson was in her apartment in Morningside Heights when her roommate Jade sent her the link. She watched it once. She watched it a second time. The second time she watched her grandmother's left hand, the way it shook slightly after Craig let go of her arm, the way Dorothy straightened in her chair and looked at the man who had grabbed her without a single degree of fear in her face. Amara's jaw set in the way that Jade had learned in 3 years of living with her meant that something was about to happen. She sent the message to Craig's number, which she had found through a combination of her own resourcefulness and a classmate who worked part-time at a corporate research firm. She sent it on pure adrenaline before she thought it through. She was a law student. She knew exactly what was and was not legal action. She sent it anyway because she had just watched the woman she loved most in the world get grabbed by a stranger over an airport seat, and 500 miles of distance had not made her feel any less present at Gate 22 when it happened. Then she called her mother. Janet answered on the first ring. "I am tracking her flight," she said before Amara said anything. "She left Memphis at 4:40 this morning, and she is currently over Indiana, and she has been tracking as on time since takeoff." "Mom." "I know," Janet said. "I know she told you she was fine. She also told your uncle she was fine, and she told me she was fine, and she tells everyone she is fine every time something happens that would put most people in a hospital." "She is fine," Amara said. "She is in first class." Kevin from the gate called ahead. There was a pause. Janet breathed. "First class, the airline upgraded her. No charge." Janet was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Good. That is the least they could do." The family group thread had been active for 2 hours. Aunt Karen had shared the video to her Facebook page and attached a 3-paragraph caption. Uncle Marcus Jr. had responded with a row of fire emojis and a message saying that he was not going to cry at the graduation, which everyone in the family understood to mean that he was absolutely going to cry at the graduation. Amara sent one message to the thread. "Grandma is fine. First class." She said not to do anything dramatic. Her exact word was dramatic. Amara borrowed Jade's car. She did not wait at the apartment. She drove to LaGuardia and parked in the short-term garage and stood in the arrivals area with her phone in her pocket and watched the flight status board update landed. She pushed to the front of the crowd. She found a clear sight line to the exit corridor. She was scanning for a pale blue coat, a handbag held in both hands, a left hand with a small quiet tremor that had been there for 2 years and that Dorothy referred to as my hand doing what it does as if it were simply a feature of the landscape rather than something to be concerned about. She was scanning for the woman who had sat across the kitchen table from her on 100 Saturday afternoons, and explained what justice meant and why it was worth building your life around. The woman who had said when Amara called her after failing an exam in her second semester, in the voice of someone who had been waiting to say this for exactly this moment. You did not come this far to let one test be the story. Get up. She had gotten up. She found her. A pale blue coat moving through the arrivals crowd with the unhurried certainty of a woman who knows exactly where she is going. Grandma. Dorothy saw Amara from 20 feet away. The height, the posture, the way she held herself straight and certain, the posture of someone who has decided who they are and is not asking for confirmation. All of it so completely her grandfather that Dorothy felt something shift in her chest, the familiar ache of love that has been carrying loss inside it for 8 years and has learned to carry both at the same time. She walked into her granddaughter's arms. Neither of them said anything. The arrivals terminal moved around them, indifferent and luminous, full of its own noise. They held on. When they separated, Amara kept her hands on Dorothy's shoulders and looked at her face with the focused attention of someone conducting an inspection that matters. "You are okay," Amara said. "Not quite a question." "I am standing in front of you," Dorothy said. "Does that count?" Amara's eyes moved to Dorothy's left arm. She reached out and very carefully pushed the sleeve back. She saw the bruise, 4 finger-shaped marks already deepening toward purple. She went very still. Dorothy said, "I am here. I got on the plane. I am in time for your graduation. That is the story. That is the whole story," Amara breathed. "It is not the whole story. It is the part that matters," Dorothy said, and she pulled her sleeve back down and smoothed it with the firm and final motion of a woman closing a door. "Now, are we going to stand in this airport, or are we going to go somewhere and eat something that did not come in a foil bag? Because I have been awake since 5:30 this morning, and I would very much like a meal." Amara almost laughed. She wiped one eye fast, as if annoyed at it for the disclosure. "There is a place near campus," she said. "Italian. You will like it. You will." "Lead the way," Dorothy said. "Columbia Law School graduation." The auditorium held 800 people, and it was full before 10:30. The kind of full that has a sound of its own, the collective exhalation of families who have been waiting for this day and cannot quite believe it has arrived. Janet was in the 3rd row with a tissue already in her hand. Marcus Jr. sat beside her, arms crossed, jaw-set eyes already suspiciously bright. Dorothy sat between them. She wore the navy coat with the pearl buttons. She had pinned her hair. She had her good handbag in her lap, and the graduation program open to the page with Amara's name on it. She did not speak. She pressed her lips together and held the feeling in her chest. Amara Celeste Henson, Juris Doctor. She held it the way you hold something enormous and true that you have been building toward for so long that you are afraid to breathe wrong and disturb it. The processional began. 300 graduates in black caps and gowns filing through the auditorium doors in sequence. Dorothy looked at each face as they came through, scanning with the focused patience she had brought to every courtroom she had ever entered, looking for one face, and then she saw her. Amara was tall like Raymond. She held herself like Raymond. She moved through the processional with the same quality of self-possession, the walk of someone who has not arrived by accident and knows it. She was scanning the rows as she walked, looking for the 3rd row, looking for her family. The moment she found them, the moment her eyes landed on Dorothy in the navy coat, she stumbled. One step, just one, just enough, that the person behind her put out a steadying hand before she caught herself. And then she smiled, huge and real and entirely unpracticed. The smile of someone who has worked for every single inch of this moment and is not pretending it was easy or ordinary or less than what it is. Dorothy raised her left hand, one small wave, her hand trembling quietly, rising in the warm air of the auditorium. Amara laughed, a short, bright, involuntary sound that made the people around her turn and smile without knowing why. Then she walked forward into her row, into her seat, into the rest of her life. When Amara's name was called, Amara Celeste Henson, Juris Doctor, the applause from the 3rd row was loud enough that the dean glanced up briefly from the podium. Janet was crying. Marcus Jr.'s jaw had loosened into something that looked, if you knew him, precisely like a man crying in the way men who have decided not to cry actually cry, everything restrained except the eyes. Dorothy did not cry. She clapped, both hands steady and sure, the left one and the right one together, and she watched her granddaughter walk across that stage and take that diploma and shake that hand. And she held every year of her life in that moment, Raymond and the bench and the chemotherapy appointment she drove herself to, and the airport seat she had refused to give up, and the bruise under her sleeve. She held all of it, not as weight, as evidence. Evidence that the way you carry yourself through the world is not a small thing, that it accumulates, that it passes from hand to hand and from generation to generation quietly and without announcement, the way a steady hand rests over a trembling one at a restaurant table the night before everything changes. In the courtyard outside the auditorium after the ceremony, after the photographs had been taken and Janet had cried again and Marcus Jr. had finally admitted he had cried and Amara had her diploma in one hand and her grandmother's hand in the other, a woman approached them. Early 30s blazer notebook, the particular focused energy of a journalist on a specific assignment. "Mrs. Henson," she said, "I am with the Tribune. I have been covering the story from O'Hare. I wondered if you had anything you would like to say to the people who have been following this." Amara stepped forward slightly. Dorothy put a hand on her arm gently, the way you stop someone you love from doing something that is not necessary. She looked at the journalist. She thought for a moment. "Tell them I made my flight," Dorothy said. The journalist looked at her. "Is that all?" "That is all," Dorothy said. She turned back to her family. In the weeks that followed, the story did not disappear the way stories sometimes do. Craig Whitfield faced a formal inquiry. His company came under scrutiny. Marcus Webb did eventually reach out again, not for the pitch, but for the honest conversation he had promised. Craig issued a brief public statement 3 weeks after O'Hare, plain and unpolished, and notably free of the language of damage control. "I behaved in a way that caused real harm to a person who deserved none of it. There is no version of what I did that was acceptable. I am trying to understand how I got to a place where I thought it was." Amara passed the bar on her first attempt 7 months later. She called Dorothy from the street outside the testing center, voice shaking. Dorothy was in her garden in Memphis when the phone rang. She answered and heard the same quality of sound she had heard 6 years ago from a Columbia parking lot at 3 in the morning, and she said, "Slow down, baby. Tell me." And Amara said, "Grandma." I passed. Dorothy sat down on the garden bench. She looked at the roses Raymond had planted. She said, "I know, sweetheart. I know you did." At the Italian restaurant near Columbia the night before the graduation, they had sat at a corner table with a candle between them, bread brought without being asked. Amara talking about her future, all the things she was going to build. Dorothy listening with the full and unhurried attention she had given every person in every room in her life who had deserved it. At the end of the meal, Amara reached across the table and took her grandmother's hand. The left hand, the one that trembled. She held it. Dorothy held back. Amara said, "Everything I am, I learned from watching you. Every time I wanted to quit, I thought about you, and I did not quit." Dorothy covered Amara's hand with her own. "I know," she said. "I have always known." She had been told to move. She had not moved, and the world in the end had moved around her instead, just as she had always quietly and without drama refused to believe it would not. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that dignity is not something that can be taken, only surrendered, please, take a second right now and hit that like button. It costs nothing, and it helps this story reach more people who need to hear it. Subscribe to this channel if you have not already, because we tell stories like this every single week. Stories about people who held their ground when it would have been easier to walk away. Share this one with someone who needs it today. A mother, a grandmother, a friend who has been told in one way or another to move. Drop a comment below and tell me what city are you watching from. And tell me about someone in your life who has Dorothy's kind of quiet strength. I want to hear about them. I will see you in the next story. This is a work of original fiction. All characters' events and institutions depicted are entirely imaginary and created for storytelling purposes only. Any resemblance to real persons or events is coincidental.